Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Peggy SmedleyShow. My next guest is returning today to zero in on one of the biggest shifts happening in the automotive world. Now, we're talking about the moment where vehicles, factories, supply chains move from what we talk about digital tools to truly intelligent, connected, and continuously moving systems. Now, we're tackling real-time diagnostics, OTA updates, predictive service, the convergence of engineering, manufacturing, and data into this single living digital thread. And it's this turning points that reshaping how cars are built, how they operate, how the entire value chain actually works in tandem. And I'm really excited to have my guest help us break it down, what this transformation really means for automotive suppliers, the future of mobility. Once again, who's joining me is John Reed. I'm very excited. He's the Global Solutions Leader for Manufacturing and Mobility Industries at Microsoft. John, I'm so excited to have you back again.
Hey, thanks, Peggy. It's great to be here. I've very much enjoyed our prior conversations and looking forward to our dialogue today.
It's exciting because the industry is changing so much and your role has changed so much. I think the last time you and I spoke, it was in January of 2025. I can't believe that it's already shifted so much, and then how much the transformation's occurring. So I thought before we dive right into everything, I would love for you to give our listeners and viewers an update of where things are today, where you are in the state of Microsoft, and then we can talk about what's been going on.
Great. We'll start with the least important part of this, which is me, but just for context, not public yet, but you'll see it posted on LinkedIn. In February, I relocated to Tokyo from Redmond, and I'm now the general manager for Asia for our global manufacturing and mobility industry organization. So that covers automotive, discrete, process manufacturing, semiconductor, high tech, as well as travel and transport. What my team does globally, and then here in Asia, is focused on connecting our global industry strategy directly with our local industry leadership and our customers. And so what we drive together across Microsoft is scale, understanding very quickly what's happening in a market, and then ensuring that the overall approach that Microsoft has is well dialed into the needs of our customers and our partners.
And the moment we talk this very quickly, you're just moving as fast as the industry's moving. I
Absolutely.
can't keep up with you. It's exciting. You're going to be learning
Yeah.
all kinds of new languages. But that's what's exciting. I think for our listeners and everybody watching this right now, they have to keep pace because as we talk about what's happening here in 2026, I think it's a real turning point. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think from your perspective, what's finally pushing manufacturing to look from these digital tools into intelligent systems, as you talk about the role that even you're having, I think the industry has to realize that they have to keep moving quick or they're going to be left behind.
Yeah, I completely agree, Peggy. What we're seeing globally, not just in Asia, but I think the trend over the last, say, 6 to 9 months is that we're moving from pilots, for example, as a state of the industry, to deep implementation, which involves business process reengineering and then the orchestration of technology and process and change across the enterprise. And so in that sense, AI and the data that supports it really becomes part of an enterprise nervous system. Some of the things we saw in automotive at CES a couple of months ago are great examples. As we head to Hanover Messe, our large manufacturing event in April, we're starting to see this inflection point and the level of adoption at the core business level with our customers across all segments and geographies is really extraordinary. You said it's an inflection point in 2026 and one that we're working quickly and deliberately to help our customers with our partners, help them achieve their transformational objectives.
Do you think when they have to achieve those objectives, that they're fully prepared for it? Because you've described in the past, I guess, us talking about, and I said it in the intro, about the digital thread is becoming very living. And as you talked about what happened at CES and Hanover Messe, is that it's the breathing system. And I guess when I think about this, and we've talked in the past about the Internet of Things and now AI, so paint a picture, because I think when we look at all the things that have to come together, when we talk about engineering, the factory, maybe the supply chain, all of this in making decisions in real time almost seems very difficult. It almost seems overwhelming. but it seems to be collaborative now, and it's a systems that's coming together. In some ways, it's very harmonious. And so that digital thread in a lot of ways is really making it easier, even though companies think that it's harder.
That's a great question. I think I'll carve this up into two dimensions. So, what's the aspiration? And then how are we doing? From an aspiration standpoint, it absolutely is what we describe as a digital thread. And the term has been present in manufacturing and other sectors for a long time. The idea is that you should be able to connect an enterprise together across process and data and enable capabilities in sort of real time, from manufacturing to production to supply chain to sales and service. What's happening in this era of agentic AI, when we talked about the autonomy and process reengineering a couple of moments ago, is that the aspiration now is to think about not just the interconnection of the enterprise, but how can processes be changed and how can agents be orchestrated across the business. So I'll give you an example. We're working with a customer right now that's built a set of agents to support engineering transformation. Think about ways that requirements management, compliance, engineering change requests can all be augmented autonomously to support engineers to speed up, say, product delivery lifecycle. On the other end, for example, the value chain, look at sales and marketing. That same customer is also building agents to mine their field service as well as their contact center data, looking for features and looking for new capabilities as well as product quality issues. So they built agents in both areas and now are starting to connect those agents together. So there we see not only just real-time data exchange, but actually the build out of business processes and agents that can apply autonomy over the top. And it's really, as I said, and it's an inflection point in how we think about the transformation. Now, if that's the aspiration, how are we doing? Organizations are on a spectrum of maturity and capability and readiness for this. And that's where organizations like Microsoft and our partners fit in. We can help look at how we take projects and break them down from months and years to weeks and months. How can we really understand the business process requirements? How can we think about automated process mining to understand context and change? So all of these things are kind of a partnership that threads together the people, the process, and the tech to help our customers be successful.
That's an interesting point you make, because we've been saying people, process, and tech for a long time. Now we're combining the agents at different spectrums of the operation, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in engineering, all the way to the front end, to the sales side. So now we're saying, how does this all evolve? Whether now we're looking at our co-pilots, whether we're having those agents be side by side with us to be that partner to get things done and take all that action with us, or how this will change the day-to-day operation. So it seems like right now we're saying things on the plant floor are changing, things in the financial operation are changing, things on the sales end are changing through the entire supply chain. So when that happens, does that make this just-in-time operation changes so that people in all facets say, we never thought that was possible? Because in the way we used to say it in manufacturing, we had all these islands of operations. But now we're closing the loop on all of that.
Exactly. If you take those islands of operations and think about islands of successful AI implementation, what we're really at a point now in the spectrum of moving to autonomous processes, process reengineering, is that 70% of the scaling success is going to depend on people and process. And so we're taking those successes that happen in individual areas and scaling those out. Say more agents and more capability in an area like factory and production or engineering. But as I mentioned earlier, connecting those together across the enterprise and really thinking about what sort of people and process transformations can be enabled with the tech applied the right way and built out in a model which allows the customer to see return and effectiveness in weeks and months, not months and years.
Are we still, though, we've had this and we've used the term in the past about pilot purgatory. Are we still seeing that? Because I think we've seen a lot of companies stuck in that pilot mode. We talk about pilot purgatory, and I almost feel like sometimes we want to get away from that. But why do so many AI projects stall out? We've seen that. I'm going to go back to the IoT days. Yeah. But now, what are manufacturers maybe doing differently that they say we can get past this and actually scale, which I think is important to talk about, because AI, which you just described across production, quality, maintenance, the supply chain, but I think it's even more that, not just the supply chain within their own needs that we talk about in manufacturing, but extending it out globally, which is what
Yeah.
you're doing. And that makes the ability to do things when the unexpected happens. And that's what's happening in our world today. It's the unexpected.
Exactly. And in this area, if we looked at it first as what's not working, where the challenges come from, what causes pilot purgatory, what challenges scale. And it's fragmented data, it's an unclear definition of goals and what ROI really looks like. It's missing real understanding of requirements and process definition and reengineering and cultural resistance. What successful organizations are doing in their initial projects and to scale are bringing together data fundamentally, looking at business process, applying BPR as required, thinking about where the technology fits, making sure that the organization is aligned at all levels, and then making sure that the flywheel of success that comes from those initial projects is built into the business as part of a repeatable process that enables the organization to learn from those successes and deeply embed them. In some ways, the blockers are really classic computer science challenges where we need to make sure that the tech is applied in the right way. And as we're seeing customers really benefit from thinking about process reengineering and the fit and the culture, that's where we see successful projects in an area like engineering, but scale across the enterprise.
Are we seeing that flywheel that you talk about and making things fit? Are we seeing there's still resistance to a lot of things in the sense that it's changing and you still have this idea that everyone throws around the term, and maybe this is not what you're necessarily referring to, but maybe it's what came to mind as I heard you talk, is that IT, OT. I see operational technology and information, that IT, OT kind of discussion comes to mind, but we have to see the convergence. And we've talked about this for a long time, and I think you and I talked about it in the past as well, but it doesn't really look like the same shop floor anymore. I think it's a different thing. And again, it goes back to islands of automation or who's fighting who. But I think now we have this idea that you have to work differently, because if you don't, you're going to be out. There's this whole new way of saying, how is it helping factories diagnose, decide, act at the right time? But also there's a mentality that we can see things differently. We have information to make decisions now that we didn't, that help us. It's not only just information, individual mindset, it's the actual data that we didn't have before. Has that come to mind as well?
It absolutely is. I think that your point about IT and OT convergence and what it really means these days is where we're starting to see the transformation show up in real benefits, from employees on the line in a plant through plant management, as well as other areas of the business that are dependent on operational excellence. On one hand, we see a lot of our customers applying classic application of lean, for example, in continuous improvement. And at the same time, the way the technologies are being applied provides a brand new set of ways of understanding the business. So I'll give you an example or a preview of one of the cases that will be highlighted at Hanover Messe in April. We're seeing AI move from dashboards right to the factory floor. So real-time factory data is now connected end-to-end, replacing instinct and fragmented decisions with live real-time data. It's not analytics after the fact, it's AI in the flow of work. So operators and engineers can take a look at what root causes are, can define golden runs, improve quality while production is running. So in that sense, the AI agents are starting to work together alongside the people in the plant. Factory teams can interact with complex production data. We can use things like Copilot and Teams to provide a framework for surfacing this. We can use multiple models. We have lots of flexibility in underlying tech, but it's really a kind of democratized understanding of the context of the business with better tools to make the work easier for the managers and the line staff in the plant. And so in this case, the breakthrough is really trust and adoption. When all the roles see from a process and a people standpoint the same real-time data, the conversations in the business shift to the definitive sources of truth, and change becomes easier to accept, and it becomes a proof for the value of a deeper adoption. And so this becomes, as a kind of a single example, a kind of blueprint for AI-ready factories. And it's also an on-ramp for what we see now with the emergence of robotics and physical AI as a basis for continuing this evolution around human digital interaction and the ways that artificial intelligence and process reengineering can really benefit the employees in the factory along with the overall factory operations.
Do we look at this now of saying, we've talked about it again, instead of being reactive, this is much more predictive instead of in
Exactly.
looking at this. Is the information then very accurate? Because bad data is bad data. But is this data that you're looking at, and the engineers and everybody looking at the information is looking at better, cleaner data that allows them to say, we're acting at making clean value decisions, that we can know that this part isn't going to break later, that we are looking at something that says everything on the factory floor is much better than what we ever had before?
Absolutely. And that is where we and our partners work closely with our customers to understand the data, to integrate it together, to bring it into frameworks so there's a semantic context for the information in the plant, where you build technologies or solutions on top of that data to understand operations or to automate processes or to integrate with a physical AI or embodied AI strategy. All of those are a partnership between technology and the process and the business to make sure that not only is the data right, but the process is right, and the experience for the employees in the factory, for example, is right as well.
As I hear you talk, then that also brings me to think about the vehicles and the equipment, as we continue to talk about, aren't static products anymore. As AI continues to say, we're turning them into this constant actionable pieces of improving platforms. And we've talked about over the air and how that is your updates, predictive services, we're just mentioning real-time diagnostics. So the consumer is thrilled. Everything that's happening is happening right there, and they're happy. They're not having to worry. Are we getting better at that? So really being able to say the mapping, everything that we're doing is getting better, faster, more accurate?
We are. And I'm thinking about our last discussion before CES a year ago and some of the innovations in that area. If I fast forward to now, and we look at sort of the progress of AI technology from models, from underlying silicon, from dev tools to security, et cetera, what we're starting to see is a transformation. So one is in autonomous devices, like autonomous vehicles, for example. We now have clear line of sight to L3, L4 autonomy. We're starting to see the capabilities expand. At the same time, the second case, what I would describe as industrial AI, including physical AI and robotics, becomes an opportunity to integrate the robotics and other devices inside production, for example, or warehouse or transportation and logistics, in a way which takes advantage of that same sort of autonomous capability. And then the third category would be enterprise AI. So think about this as the digital analog to what happens in production. So your robots are digital, but ultimately what you're doing is effectively the same thing. You're understanding context, you're driving autonomy, you're aligning with business process, and you're making life easier for employees in the enterprise, as well as the customers and the products and services that they use.
So I guess I have probably a crazy analogy here, and bear with me as I think about it. So let me ask this. I guess the way I look at this is, once AI was making these decisions instead of just recommending, and that's what we're talking about. So now there's this whole new ball game. If we think long term here, if we're thinking, this is an industry that once looked like, I guess, the Babylon of automation. Maybe I'm making an exaggeration here, but bear with me.
Sure.
It's brilliant, but it was built on these islands, right? Of isolated islands. That's what we could talk about. What does trust look like now for the factory floor? If we're thinking about it and we want listeners to process this, how do you build governance? Because this is what we're all worried about. And I guess we should think about it. Is there enough governance strong enough to support autonomy that we're all comfortable with?
There absolutely is. And without making this an architectural discussion, let me paint the broad strokes. So a lot of the trust, it has to do with security, with observability. So do I understand what the system is doing, why it made the decisions, where decisions need to improve? How does that happen? We need to connect systems together, your classic systems integration challenges. And on top of that, as we talked about earlier, we need to think about the business processes and context to which these serve, as well as what the experiences of the employees in the enterprise are as well. And the capabilities we have to establish, let's say, for example, a control plane for agents, allows us to treat an agent, for example, as an entity in the enterprise architecture that has its own ID, that has its own controls, that respects boundaries on operational processes and data. And that sort of control plane, for example, is one element among many of ways that we can help create that level of security and observability, and then navigate toward the process outcomes as well as the employee experience that really benefits the companies that we're working with in a substantive way.
I always like it when you give us customer examples. Are there some right now that we could talk about? Because that's when I think our listeners really learn a lot. Let's talk about some of them.
Yeah, so I'll give you maybe a couple of cases. As I mentioned earlier, when we look at the factory environment, some of the things that we'll be showcasing at Hanover. If I looked at the vehicle space, for example, we had a great announcement with Nissan and our partner Wave, based in the UK, that's focused on vehicle autonomy, also a great partner of ours with NVIDIA. And we're seeing that scale as a great example. When we look at the OT and security space, we have a great public case study with Ford, for example, where they're utilizing our core information technology security stack as a key element of how they secure their enterprise. And so if I draw the spectrum from sort of capability and innovation, how we really affect what customers and employees see and experience and how that folds into operations, as well as what customers can touch and do with products and services, we're able to integrate those together and support them with the right security foundation and the right level of architectural elements that ground AI in the way that our customers want to run their business from a secure and observable standpoint.
Are there others that you think of? I know there's been, not just in the automotive, you've had some really good manufacturing customers that are coming out, and you're looking at this right now that that are a part of the things that are doing, that are really doing some cutting edge. Can we talk about some of those that extend beyond what you're doing overall?
Absolutely. I'll pick a couple of cases that we showcased around CES as well, not just in automotive, but in some other events that we've done with some of our customers in Asia. So, for example, Xiaomi, the mobile device and automotive manufacturer in China, built a unified after-sales supply chain platform using some of our business applications products along with Azure, which enables multi-language support and real-time proactive inventory management across 100 markets. So this sort of takes AI from the factory floor to the core services that support the customers that they need to create an excellent experience for. With Lenovo, another customer of ours in China, they deployed a solution that unifies its customer data and sales processes into a single digital platform, which allows for observability from leads and customer engagement through sales and service. And so those are two kind of classic examples of the combination of business process, systems integration, and then partnership, integrating these applications into an existing landscape with a number of our strategic partners, and then enabling that sort of end-to-end transformation.
As I hear you talk and all the end-to-end transformation you're talking about, the leaders that are going to happen, I think at the end of the day, when I hear you, the real differentiator is going to be, it's not who's dabbling in AI, because that's obvious. If you're not doing it, you're going to be left behind. It's who can scale it, who can do so much more. So why will, in your opinion, will scalable AI, I guess is maybe the better word, be the dividing or line between leaders and laggards? Maybe that's a really great tagline for 2026, because I think, and beyond, I don't think it's just this year. I think it's everybody's going to have to continually keep pace, or again, it's going to be the turtle or the hare kind of thing.
It is. In some cases, it is a highly scaled example of the classic opportunities that are present with transformational tech. But the challenge is that it's widely applicable, touches all areas of the business, and is accelerating, not only in the advantages that tech can create, so innovations at the platform, the tools, and the applications level, but also innovation in how our customers are using it. Part of the drivers for scale we talked about earlier. How is the organization adopting it? How are you looking at change and culture and process reengineering? But at the same time, what we're beginning to see is that all manufacturers are establishing roadmaps across almost all areas of their business, from engineering, supply chain, factory, customer, sales, and service. And we're starting to see real benefits. About 80% of manufacturers right now have a concern about making sure that they establish and maintain competitiveness based on AI. And we're starting to see multiples of impact, 4 times impact, for example, in a business process that's powered by AI versus ones that have a light application of technology or are engineered in a different fashion. So the benefits are showing up. We're out of pilot purgatory, and now it's an opportunity for Microsoft and our partners to show up and assist our customers in driving this transformation across their enterprise.
We've talked a lot about software intelligence, and that's what we're saying, and it's AI, and we're saying that. But what about the physical side of AI? Because I think we have to make sure our people understand both sides of this. So how are robotics? And we just saw there's a lot of acquisitions, startups being acquired, the physical AI transforming the factory floor. That's going to play a critical role. And what's the next frontier for intelligent machines that can sense, move, act in the real world?
Absolutely. One of the things that we saw, particularly in the last couple of quarters, is this sort of explosion on the topic of physical AI and robotics. And so at Microsoft, we're focused in three areas. One is working with our customers and partners to accelerate robotic innovation. The second is operationalizing physical intelligence. So this is taking the data, the digital twins, the contextual understanding of what's happening, whether it's a factory or a plant, and then allowing that to be operationalized in the context of the processes and the robotics that are implemented, and then scaling through partnerships. And if I were to take sort of public cases in one category of robots like industrial robotics, we work very closely with ABB, with Kuka, with Kawasaki Robotics. In the service robotics area, things like AGVs in a factory, warehouse innovation, drones, we work very closely with Boston Dynamics, with Toyota Material Handling. And then in humanoid robotics, where we actually have advanced mobility with devices or robots that have a kind of human-robot collaboration intent, we work with Figure AI, Sanctuary AI. We've done some compelling work with Hexagon as well. So we're building out an ecosystem, but ultimately our objective is to help our customers take the transformations that they're driving with data and AI and help them take that next step into the application of robotics and context to enable transformation using autonomies in those areas as well.
We saw so much discussion at CES. We saw robots everywhere at CES, and it was interesting. We've been talking about robots in manufacturing for years. Now, all of a sudden, we saw a dramatic shift at CES and saying, but robots in a different light. And that's what you're talking about, how we're going to see it and how it's going to have with the birth of AI and what AI has propelled it a little bit. Is that what our individuals need to understand, our workers need to understand, businesses need to understand how that shifted?
Yeah, from a strategy and planning standpoint, if we looked at what we're doing at a CXO level with our customers, it's really understanding how those technologies like physical AI and robotics and digital twins and AI and improvements at silicon and all levels, improvements in OT and IT security really drive transformational capabilities. So we talked a bit about robotics, but at a fundamental level, what we do, for example, is Microsoft combined with a partner like NVIDIA are providing the platform and the core capabilities, which then allow us to partner together with those companies I mentioned, for example, in the industrial or service or humanoid robotic space. And that becomes part of that broader kind of tapestry of the application of AI for business process reengineering and autonomy across engineering and supply chain production, as well as sales and service.
This has been an all-encompassing kind of conversation today, but I always like it when you leave our listeners with some final thoughts, what manufacturers should be thinking about and acting on, because it's great to hear the conversations, but they have to have something that they can do, take away from this. What are some of those things that you want companies to think about and say, we need to do this, especially now as we're in this transition with the future of work? We're making some of the older workers who've been in the industry a while start to retire and the younger ones start to get into leadership roles. What do you want them to think about and say, these are the things you need to start doing, plus constantly educating themselves on what this transition of some of the things we talked about?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I think what I'd mention is that when I look across all the customers that we're working with, across all industry sectors and all demographics, the energy that we're seeing from senior leaders, experienced engineers and plant managers to employees that have just joined from their trade school or their university, there's a significant interest in AI and a tremendous curiosity about how it could be applied and how it works. If I were to give you a checklist, strategic clarity, understanding why AI is being considered and how it's going to work, establishing the data foundation, including systems integration, thinking in depth about culture and workforce skills, how does that align in an organization that, for example, focuses on lean, establishing governance, thinking about scale and the people and the process side, and then partnerships. I think the repeatable dimension of most of the work that we're doing with most of our customers is that it's not just Microsoft and the customer, it's Microsoft, it's the customer, it's Microsoft partners, it's the customer's designated partners working together to drive innovation very quickly and practical outcomes. But that's the checklist. Really, it's understanding the people and the process and the technology and being very deliberate and creative in how that's applied and realistic about the outcomes that are being generated.
Do we have to start thinking still? It is, even though you have to think locally, it's still very much a global way of thinking about how you have to do things, especially with the role you have now. Is that the approach, or people have to focus on what their tasks are at hand? We talked about collaboration, but what do you want to, what's that message you want people to understand?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Peggy. I think I would apply the same logic we would to thinking about any of the roadmaps we build. There needs to be an aspiration. And to your point, the world is increasingly deeply interconnected, not only supply chain, but the transformational impact of partnerships, of new products, of kind of the creative output of the work that's being done in all areas of the business. And so that flywheel continues to accelerate in velocity. But at the same time, that aspiration also needs to be achieved in really clear, measurable steps, weeks and months, not months and years. So again, it's having a strong strategic vision, being really practical about how that gets built out, and have that build out happen in incremental steps around which you can measure progress, fail fast if necessary, and improve. And then from that, a lot of the people and process clarity comes directly as an outcome of working quickly against near-term goals with a longer-term strategic outcome.
John Reed, I always love when you're on the show and we talk in depth, and I really appreciate it. Where can our listeners go to get more information about what you're doing, Microsoft, and any of the important conversations that we've had many times over and over again?
Yeah, Microsoft.com manufacturing and .com/mobility, and then john.reed at Microsoft.com.
John, thank you again for spending so much time with me today.
It's my pleasure, Peggy. Thank you very much.
All right, listeners, that is all the time we have for the show today. Make sure to share and subscribe to our episodes each week. Share your thoughts with me on X at Connected World, or follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to continue the conversation there. Please check out our website at connectedworld.com, our show website at thepeggysmedleyshow.com. Remember, we broadcast live every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Central. Please check out everything that we do there. This is the Peggy Smedley Show, your voice for our connected world. And remember, with great technology comes great responsibility. Have an awesome week.